Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Well, I have a special Thanksgiving episode here where I'm going to just talk a little bit about this reading project. So maybe you are new to Books of Titans. Maybe you just started listening to some of the Plato episodes, and it's really hard to tell who listens to the podcast, but it appears that there are some new people. And so I just wanted to take this episode to talk about my reading project, some of my overall goals, and that sort of a thing. So first off, my name is Eric Rostad. I'm 45 years old. I am a husband. I am a father. I'm married to Stephanie. She's a singer-songwriter. Her music name is Stephanie Staples, and I'll link to her website in the show notes so you can check out her music. We have two daughters who are 8 and 11, and we live in Franklin, Tennessee, which is about 20 minutes south of Nashville. We love it here. It's a beautiful area. It's an area of storytellers. There are storytellers in the form of singer-songwriters. There are storytellers in the sense of script writers for films. There are tons of authors in this area, and there are just a lot of people here who love reading, who are in some way involved in the art of storytelling. And so it's a very neat community. It has a small town feel, but still you're close to a bigger city in Nashville. I own an online consulting company. That's my main work, and I've been doing that for 17 years. So I've had that company for 17 years. I mainly work with universities, small businesses, and some think tanks now in Washington, D.C. So I just work with different people and on their online presence and help them get seen and get their content out to the right places. I'm also the business manager at a local bookstore that's called Landmark Booksellers, and so I handle a lot of the technology requirements for the business. I set the direction for the business. I do the finances, payroll, that kind of thing. And then I also handle all of the events. So I work directly with a number of authors, and when they're in town, we have events with them, and that's been a lot of fun. So this reading project connects closely with those other jobs, and I may talk about why or how it does a little later on. But those are kind of my three main things: this reading project, my work at the bookstore, and then my work for that website development and online consulting company. I love reading. You should hope so, right? With having a reading project like this and working in a bookstore. But I remember when I was a child, I had a fish tank in my room, and I guarantee now that I'm a parent, I know my parents had to have known, but when I thought they thought I was sleeping, I would turn my fish tank light on and I would grab a book from the bookshelf and I would just read it under the fish tank light when I was supposed to be sleeping. And so those are some of my earliest memories. I remember some of the books that I would read. I remember taking books to school. We would have a little time to read books. I remember like a version of The Hobbit I had. I remember reading some of the Narnia books when I was a kid. And so, yeah, just like fond memories from when I was a kid. I guess I was introduced early to the magic of reading, and that has always stuck with me. But then I got to high school, and I just lost the love of reading. We were forced to read some books, and I just couldn't get into them. I disliked being forced to read books. And then towards the end of high school, I heard someone speak, and they spoke about literature. They spoke about how literature connected to the Bible, and something clicked in my head, and it opened up my mind in my just a desire to start reading the classics. And so right after graduating high school, on my own, I would read things like Crime and Punishment. And then as I got into college, I studied business, but I would almost spend more time reading books that I wanted to read. So I started getting into C.S. Lewis. I started reading books like Moby Dick, The Scarlet Letter, and other books. I just remember being enthralled by these books. But then I hit post-college, and I started working in the working world, and I kept reading up, but maybe kind of at like the 20 books per year level. I'd get together with some friends and we'd talk about books, but nothing crazy, and there wasn't really any sort of a plan going on. It was just picking up books when I thought I would enjoy them. Got married, and I vividly recall my sister-in-law being at our house when we lived in Atlanta, and my sister-in-law was looking at my bookshelves, and she looked at a book. She looked at a book, and she said, "What's this one about?" And I had just finished, bragging that I just finished this book, and I was so excited about finishing the book. And she asked the dreaded question, "What's that about?" And I couldn't tell her a single thing. And I just remember that being a really, how did I just read this book? I was really excited about it, and I couldn't tell her one thing that was in the book. It wasn't long after that I was reading Tools of Titans, a book by Tim Ferriss. And in that book, Tim Ferriss highlights different top performers, people who are at the top of their game. And it's kind of, he takes his podcast episodes and put them into this book. But he asks every one of his guests, his podcast guests, what's your favorite book? And or what is your most gifted book? So a lot of these people, they've read hundreds of books. They can't think of like the one that's their favorite. And so he would pose that other question of what is the book that you've given to other people the most? And that's usually a pretty good indication that you really enjoyed a certain book. So when I was reading that book, this is late 2016, I had an iPad open in a spreadsheet up on the iPad. And as I would come across these book recommendations, I would just type them in to this spreadsheet. So by the end of the book, I had a list of like 100, it was like between 120 and 150 books. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, these are the world's top performers, and these are the books that they credit with, changing their life, or they're thinking it's the best book. Maybe some of that magic could rub off on me. That was my 2016 thinking. And so what I decided to do was take that list of 120 books, select 52 of them, and try to do something crazy like read a book a week. Again, the most I'd probably done at that point was 20 books a year, or 20 or 30 books a year. So it was a big jump for me. I knew I was going to have to shift things around in my life. I knew I would probably have to stop watching news or reading the newspaper or watching TV. And so I did that. January 1st, 2017, I started Books of Titans, and I created this spreadsheet of here are the 52 books. I randomized the order of those 52 books just so I wouldn't stack all the ones I was really excited about at the beginning of the year. And I just started reading one book at a time. My goal at this point, kind of thinking back to that experience with my sister-in-law, was I wanted to read a lot of books and I wanted to get through these, but I wanted to remember what I read. I didn't want to just blow through a bunch of books and not be able to recall a single thing. So right off the bat, I viewed this project as an experiment. And my experiment was to attempt to figure out how I would remember books the best. And so I did things like I started writing in my books. I'd never done that before. I always thought books were holy and you just did not mark them up. But I noticed that if I marked in my books, if I underlined things, if I took notes at the end of chapters, if I took notes in the end of the book, it would help stick in my mind. My brother-in-law got wind that I was doing this project, and he said, I would like to do it with you. And you know what? We should start a podcast, and we should talk about the books after we've read them. So if you listen to some of the early episodes of this podcast, you will, there's two of us. There's Jason and myself. And based on his recommendation, that actually, the podcast is the thing that has helped me remember what I read the most. Just that act of taking an entire book and consolidating it down into a 30-minute episode and highlighting the most important things from that book and trying to tie ideas from other books together with that book. It's really been the thing that's helped me to remember books the most. And so I did what I called phase one of this reading project. I did that for 6 years. So 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. I would just make a list of 52 books every year, and I would just go through them. So at first, it was all recommendations from books suggested in Tools of Titans, but then it quickly morphed into books that were suggested by, anywhere I could find them. And then I would add books that I had wanted to read for a while. I did 1 year, 2021, where I just read through a bunch of series of books that I'd wanted to read for a while. Things like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, the Robert Caro series on Lyndon B. Johnson. I just went through different book series that year, and that was really fun. But at some point, I began to notice that books come from books. And the best example I can give is I read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And then I read probably 5 other books that took one idea from that book and applied it to finances or negotiation or psychology, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I read Thinking Fast and Slow, and that was a sort of a source book, and all of these other books are just taking one idea from that book and applying it to a specific area. I really didn't need to read those 5 other books. Just reading Thinking Fast and Slow would have done the trick. And I started listening to different podcasts at that time as well and they were talking about these things called the great books. And I had heard that term. I had never really been exposed to the great books in the sense of it, there being a project where you could actually, here's a list of books that you should read or that have set the stage for civilization. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind, and I'd actually been buying a lot of those books over the years, more as like aspirational reads of like just having these books on my shelves to kind of see them and like, I need to get around to that, but I just wasn't getting around to them. And so 2022, I started thinking, what if I shifted this reading project from just kind of a random assortment of 52 books per year? What if I shifted it, kind of got rid of that 52 book per year goal, but instead made a list of the great books and then just started reading them in chronological order. So that was the genesis of the idea. And what I did then is I just consulted a number of different great books lists. And if you did that yourself, you would start to notice certain books that make almost every single list. I started compiling my own list. This was a list of the books I really wanted to read from that list. And then I started sharing it with people. And I would share it with university professors. I would share it with friends and just said, what am I missing here? And I would also share it in an attempt to get recommendations from the East. A lot of the great books lists are focused on works from the West. And I wanted to try to incorporate works from the East as well and just kind of have a broader list. And so the limitation I put at first was 200 books. A line item of 200 line items. And so it's hard to say books because if I do like a bunch of plays by Shakespeare, do each one of those count as a book, or do I count that as one line item as an author? And so just in terms of like terminology, how do I want to, so I did like line items. So I wanted to read a number of works by Plato. I wanted to read a number of works by Shakespeare, but I didn't want to have to subtract 15 books out of those 200 total for Shakespeare and then only have 185 remaining. So I would just look at Shakespeare as one item on that list. And so I made that list of 200, and I just kind of did some rough estimates based on how long it took me to read other things. And I thought I could probably get through this in 10 years. And so that was the initial goal I had is all right, I'm starting this 2023 by 33, I would like to be done with the great books, and then I'll go on and read other things. But as I got into the great books, I started to realize that, one, some of them would take me a long time to get into them, and so I would have to reread them. And two, I started seeing gaps in my knowledge to where it made me want to fill those gaps. So maybe there were things before the book I was reading that they were referencing, but I didn't know anything about. So I would want to read that book, or at first I started talking about guidebooks. So like books to just help me understand the great books. And that was mainly because I was doing this on my own. I wasn't part of a university program where I'm listening to lectures about these works and that sort of thing. And so I just knew I needed some help in maybe setting the stage for the work or learning about the work. And so at first it kind of went from 10 years to 15 years. And I'm at a point right now where I don't know if you remember the intro to this podcast episode, but it's a friend of mine, Shona from the UK, and I had her record that intro earlier this year when her family was here visiting in Franklin, Tennessee. And I like that when she says Eric's going to be reading the Immortal books for the next 15 years, it's almost hard to tell if she's saying 15 or 50. And that is really the decision I'm trying to make at the current moment. And what sparked this decision, or this kind of thinking through how long do I really want to do this great works piece, is I started reading Plato. And when I started Plato, I got online and I said, what's the best versions of these works by Plato? And a number of people wrote back and said, you should read the one edited by Cooper. But that book is called The Complete Works of Plato. So I got that book, and it's a huge book. And I thought, okay, what if I just read the entire works of Plato? This book is about the size of the Bible. And I start each year reading straight through the Bible. And so if I do that, this book doesn't seem as big. These are the complete works of Plato. What if I just read all of them? But then I got started doing that, and I'm 9 dialogues in now, and I realized, oh no, Plato is referencing philosophers before him. And we know these philosophers as the pre-Socratics and sophists. And so I bought 3 books that dealt with the pre-Socratics and the sophists. And that was where this decision came down to a head of, all right, I know that if I stop now with Plato and read these 3 books on the pre-Socratics and the sophists, that this is going to derail me from trying to get through these books in 15 years. If I do this, I know that I'm going to want to do this for the rest of the project. Am I willing to do that? And so 50 years is probably too much, but let's say it's between 15 and 40 years. 15 years is me sticking to the plan. And if I come to Plato, I just read like 3 or 4 of his works. If I come to Aristotle, I just read 3 or 4 of his works. That's 15 years. Now, 40 years, that means I could read the entire works of Plato. I could fill in gaps in the knowledge that I don't have when I'm reading Plato by reading earlier works. It opens up opportunities to dig deeper and just kind of follow my desires as I'm reading through these great books. So a few things really quickly. I renamed the great books the Immortal books. Once I got into the great books, I realized everyone is always talking about a great book they just read, but it's a book, like it's a modern book, and it's something that won't even be around for a few years. And so I think we just throw that term great around too often. And when you see it written, great is always capitalized. So it's great books and it's capitalized, and oh, okay, these are the great books. But if you're just speaking it, great books, it just doesn't do it. It doesn't capture what these books actually are. So I started calling them the Immortal books. And I still have my list of 200 Immortal books, but the shift in 15 or 40 years, and at this point, I'm leaning more towards the 40-year option. And as a 45-year-old, 40 more years is probably my lifespan if I'm lucky. And so I'm looking at this like, is this a project where I finish it in 15 years and then read other things? Or is this a project that takes me through the rest of my life. And at this point, I'm really thinking of this is a project that takes me through the rest of my life. And I say that with one caveat here. I divide my reading year in the following way. I start off January and February, and I read straight through the Bible. That's just something I want to do. It's something I like starting the year off. And I just select a different version, a different translation of the Bible. I start on page 1 and I go to the end of the Bible. Every other year, I try to add the Apocrypha in there just to read that every other year. March through June, I am in the Immortal books, and I have a reading rule of just one book at a time. So I've got my list, and I just pick the next book on that and start reading it with this being open to pivot at points and maybe get a book that that gives some information about or helps me fill in knowledge gaps. I'm trying to leave it open for that as well. Then in July, I have what I call summer break, and that's just to read newer books that are maybe by authors that we have an event with at Landmark, or it's just book that is piled up on my to-be-read pile. That's when I read those. And so I'm not just straight up great books, or immortal books, 12 months out of the year and for the next 40 years. I have little breaks in my reading schedule. Then in August through November, I call that my fall semester, and I'm back in the immortal books. And then in December, I do my winter break, and that's another break month. So any given year, I'm 8 months in the great books, the immortal books, and then I'm 2 months with the Bible, and then 2 months with just kind of other books. So that helps divide the year. And I mean, some of these immortal books are very intense, like Plato. Some of those just hurt my brain. So it's nice to kind of know that I've got a break coming where it's books that aren't going to be as intense. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I'm in Plato, which means I've read some of the works from Mesopotamia, from Egypt. I've read Homer. I read Homer multiple times. And then when I got to the Greek tragedies, I was thinking just 2 or 3 tragedies per playwright, but then I decided to read them all. So I read all of the works by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. I even read the fragments of the works that we don't have from them, that we only have in fragment form. I really nerded out on that kind of thing, and I'm so glad I did. It's been so fun. I read some of the comedies by Aristophanes, and then some of the histories by Herodotus and Thucydides and Xenophon, and it's been a blast. So yeah, I'm in Plato right now. I'm actually taking a diversion to read those pre-Socratics and the Sophists, and then I will be back in Plato probably early again next year. So as for why I'm doing this project, one is I never read these books. I was never in a school program that had us reading Homer or the Greek tragedies. This is the first time I'm reading all of this stuff. For Plato, I read a little bit in one course in college, and I read the Republic for the first time in 2017 in the first year of this reading project, but really had no context for it and didn't understand very much of it at all. So there is this just sense of I'm making up for lost time. I really want to read these books, but part of it is just driven by that fact that I never read most of these immortal books, and I want to. I have this fear of missing out. When I see certain books, like if I go to a bookstore and I see certain books on the shelves, I want to know what's in them. I want to know why that book has impacted people throughout time. So I just have this deep curiosity, and I love to learn. I love when I'm reading and I see a connection that I never made before. I love that feeling of learning something through reading. I put a great emphasis on that. If I hear like somebody on a TV show say something, I would want to read it instead and make sure that I've seen it in a book as opposed to just hearing somebody say it. And yeah, so that's kind of some of the why of why I started this project, why I have this desire to keep this project going for many years, and I'm here to learn. So it's humiliating to think back to some of the podcast episodes I've done about the books, just because I know I've said things that are incorrect. I thought they were correct at the time, but I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with sounding dumb, saying things that are incorrect for the sake of learning. And so I mention that so that if you hear me say anything incorrect in a podcast episode, please let me know, because I want to know. I'm here to learn. And yeah, so that's some of the why behind this project. For Landmark Booksellers, that job I have there, I've been working there since 2018. The events has been really fun. I've got to meet some incredible authors. Just a few months ago, I was able to talk to Malcolm Geit about my reading about Plato right now, and he offered some insight. He offered some other books that I should check out to see how people took Plato's ideas and expanded on them later on. And that was just such a delight. But yeah, just the authors that I come in contact there with, their even some events this week with different books have just been an absolute delight. The job has also given me a pulse just on what are people reading? How are people behaving in terms of the books that they're buying? What's catching on and that kind of thing. And I love just learning about that and seeing what people buy, what people want to read. And I love the conversations. I love when I'm in the store and I get to talk to people about books and that sort of thing. I also lead a reading group at the bookstore, and it's once a month, and we go through short, great books. And that's been a delight. One question I get a lot is, when do you read? I mostly read in the morning, so I try to get up about an hour before the rest of my family, and I put coffee on, and I just sit and guzzle coffee and read. And that's when I get most of my reading done. I then have a rule to always carry a book. So in kind of those 5-10 minute increments during the day, I try to just read. I have a very bad habit of checking my phone. I'm trying to not do that, and then just always have that book with me to where that's what I pick up first. And yeah, but mainly it has become part of my life. And if nothing else, it's just a matter of being consistent. And I just try to read in the morning every day, and it's amazing how that adds up over time. I heard this story. I've have a new friend for this year, and he was telling me a story of a pretty famous musician who came up to him one day and just kind of followed him around before a concert and just kept asking him, "Do you read? Do you read? Do you read?" And finally he was like, "Yes, I read. Why are you asking me?" And the guy said, "Oh man, have you read these books?" And he gave him books to read, and this guy ended up reading those books, and they had a big impact on his life. But the part of that story that I love is just somebody being so interested in what someone else is reading. And I kind of want to be like that. I want to walk up to people and just ask them, "Do you read? And what do you like reading? And what's your favorite book?" A question I love to ask is, "What is your hinge book?" Hinge book being the book that, if I was to look at your bookshelf, what book is there that all the other books hinge upon? Like if you had not read that book, you would not have the rest of your library. You would not have gotten into reading. I love talking to people about that kind of thing. I love being in someone's library and just kind of asking them how they organize it, or what are their favorite books that they've gotten, or what are the most meaningful books that they have. My biggest joy with this project is hearing from people who have picked up a book or picked up a series of books after hearing about it on the podcast, and that they have started reading that. I gave a book to a friend probably 5 years ago now, and I didn't know this before I gave the book to him, but he said that was the first book he had read since college, and it just got him on this trajectory of reading more. And so I love that kind of thing of just seeing people get into reading or recapturing the joy they had when they were younger of reading. A few fun things to mention about these episodes. When the episode starts, and then the music that's in between segments and then the music at the end is a song that I played on and helped to write when I lived in Atlanta. So we had pitched this song to different artists, but I'm playing violin on that song. My sister is actually playing the harp, and it's just kind of a fun song that we did. So the song never went anywhere. No one ever took it. And so I asked if we could use it for the podcast, and we could. And then the person that intros each of these episodes is Shona. She is a dear friend of my wife's, and we're friends with her and her husband. And she has just the most posh British accent. So just so that I would sound smart right from the beginning, I had her do the introduction of the podcast. Because if you have if you have that accent, you sound smart. So it's a great way to start out the episode. So a few kind of fun things about the episodes themselves. I am in the process. I'm trying to write a book, and the hardest thing for me right now is just setting aside the time. I know I need to do it, and it would be a book about this reading project and perhaps helping you to become a better reader. But that's in the works. I hope that could be something that comes out in 2026. So I'll keep you posted on that. The main thing about this project is I'm viewing it as a lifelong learning project, a lifelong reading project. And I hope, if nothing else, I hope it inspires you to get into reading more. For me, it's where I hear from God the most. I don't know a better way to say it than that. It's a time where I'm quiet. It's a time where I'm learning. It's a time where I'm listening to what the author is saying. It's a time where my brain can make connections, and it's one of my favorite things. I just love coming down to my office each morning, drinking coffee and reading these books. Each year of this project has gotten better. I think going into the great books, the immortal books, I thought, this is a bucket list. I want to read through these books before I die. But I'm to the point now where these are the best books I've ever read. I like this. This is the most fun I've ever had reading books. So why would I not want to keep doing this more and more and dig deeper into these great books? And so I'm having a blast with it. It's not work at all. Like it is just, it's so much fun. I love the connections I'm making. I do feel dumber. Just the more I come across in these works, the more I realize how little I actually know. And I'm trying to fill in those gaps. I am coming from way far behind in just terms of what I've read and all that. But I'm having a delight along the way. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you have any questions about the project, I would love to answer them, and feel free to reach out either by commenting on this episode or emailing me at eric@booksoftitans.com. You can follow Books of Titans on Instagram or Twitter. I've got a website that has all the information about the books I've read from 2017 through today. I'll be posting 2026 lists coming up, and you can see my Immortal Books list of 200 authors there as well. I'll be back next week to discuss another book that I've read this year. And until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.